Cavallini for that wonderful introduction. First of all, I want to give honor to God for allowing all of us to be here, us safely here, and also prayerfully bringing us to our destinations as we leave. Also, thank everybody out here for being here. I think Dr. King, who we are celebrating today, will be proud as we see everybody from, different races, different nationalities, and different creeds. I think he would be, very elated to see everyone out here. And as Mr. Cavallini said, my name is Richard Taylor. I'm from Goldsboro, North Carolina. And I do have a radio show called The U-Turn Show here in Greenville, North Carolina. And also an author, speaker. And I've been working with the Free James Richardson campaign for about a year. Had the opportunity to meet at Pastor Hairston's York Memorial last year and meet all of the great people who are working with the organization in the name of justice. And as we celebrate Martin Luther King Jr. Today, that's one of the things that he was most prominently known for, was his fight for justice. It would be 55 years, if I'm not mistaken, on April 4th, that Mr. King was assassinated. And of course, we celebrate his birthday today, but we must remember his death and at whose hands that his life came to an end. In 1999, amongst the scandal of Bill Clinton, and everybody was worried about what he was doing with Monica Lewinsky, there was an investigation in 1999 that found out that it was the U.S. government and certain entities that were complicit in the death of Martin Luther King. So we don't want to take that for granted. It's almost hypocritical that the same nation that would honor him today would be the main catalyst for his demise. So, and we definitely have to take that into consideration. But also, the work he did was not an easy work. It was said at the time of his death he was only 39, but he had a heart of a 60-year-old man. So that shows the sacrifice of his own health and of his own mortality to fight this good fight of justice. And although he was known as a great civil rights leader, more importantly, he was a minister, a reverend of the gospel. And as I look back at many of his speeches, I see the remnants of the gospel in his life. But one of the nicknames they gave Martin in his civil rights capacity was a drum major for justice. He was a drum major for justice. And one thing that coincides with his biblical studies was justice. Me being a newly ordained minister myself, I am inclined to align myself with the biblical concepts of justice. And there are many scriptures that refer to the concepts and the necessities of the need for justice. And I will just quote you a few in Psalms 82:3. The great biblical king and poet David said, "Give justice to the weak and defend the cause of the fatherless." There's another prophet in the book of Isaiah, the 1st chapter, verse 17. He says, "Learn to do good and seek justice. Defend the oppressed and plead the cause of the fatherless." And I'm gonna park right there. He said, seek justice. So that means sometimes justice may be hidden in the form of lawyers and statutes and laws and mandates. So we have to seek justice. He goes on, Isaiah goes on in verse 30, in chapter 30, verse 18, he says, I, the Lord God, am a God of justice. Justice. And further down in chapter 61, he goes on to say, I, the Lord God, I love justice. And I hate wrongdoing and robbery. And I will venture one more, the prophet Hosea, in chapter 12, verse 6, he said, but return to your God and maintain love and justice. Now, all of these are in the Bible. The Bible speaks extensively about it. I think in Proverbs, it says, the righteous care about the justice of the poor, but the wicked, they have no concern. And one thing that Martin Luther quoted, very, very prominent mantra that he stated in one of his speeches, he said, let justice roll down like mighty waters, and righteousness like a never-ending stream. Now, in my younger days, I attribute that to Martin, but I come to later find out in my biblical studies that quote was from the book of Amos 5:24, where he said, let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. But also, earlier in that chapter 5, verse 12, God is telling the leaders of that day, he said, I have seen your many sins, and they are many. He said, I have seen how you oppress the innocent, how you take a bribe, and most importantly for this day where we at, how you deprive the poor justice in the courts. And so that's where we're at today. We at this Greenville courthouse, the Pitt County courthouse, where a lot of lives are hanging in the balance or have already been tucked away under laws and statutes. And I stand today in honor of one of those persons, Mr. James Richardson, a resident of Greenville, North Carolina, who has been languishing in the confines and the catacombs of the prisons of North Carolina for the past 12 years, accused of a crime that he did not commit, and evidence clearly shows that. But unfortunately, we have people in power. We have prosecutors who will pervert justice. These courtrooms have been corrupted by the quota of conviction rather than being controlled by the quotient of equality and compassion. The era of equality has been perverted by prosecutors who pursue political positions and professions rather than operating in the purity of prudence and preserving of justice. Once again, our justice system, it has been sedated by the stimulant of statistics and the depressing of data that will lead one to believe that the more people you incarcerate, the more safe or the more just the society is. Now, we have the Lady Justice who's taking her blindfolds off, and she has tipped the scales in the favor of the prison industrial complex and those who favor riches, who trade these prisons on the stock market and need bodies, the majority black and brown bodies, to provide cheap labor. So this is what we're here today. This is what Martin Luther King will be here today to fight against. And we have this prosecutor. I'm not afraid to say his name because I've learned so much about him. And if I see that people are speaking about a certain situation, I must speak about it too. Mr. Ferris Dixon, they claim that you ran on the basis of establishing an integrity conviction unit, or conviction integrity unit, which would go into the wrongful convictions. And it's my understanding that you have not done so. And I am here with Mrs. Richardson right here. She has been fighting for 12 years for her son's innocence and recruiting people. She recruited me. I met her, I think, in the Walmart parking lot. She told me the situation. I said, whatever you can do, whatever I can do to help, I'm there. So basically, we are here to uphold justice as Martin Luther King would. In Amos verse 5 and 15, it implores those who are in power. He says, hate evil and do good and maintain justice in the court. But he also gives a warning to those who don't provide justice. He said, cursed, in Deuteronomy, cursed be those who pervert justice. So we are here today to ask for justice, to bring the situation not of only James Richardson, but of others. Everybody should know about the case of Dante Montoya Sharp, who served 24 years before being released only 3 years ago. And only 2 weeks after his conviction, the main witness who identified him went to the courts and tried to recant her story. And they did not accept that. He had to languish, he had to fight for 24 years to get his freedom. So that's what we're looking at today. Where prosecutors like Ferris Dixon and the ones who convicted James are not willing to go back and to correct their mistakes. As Micah 6 and 8 says, he said, God only gave you one choice, that is to do good and do justice in the courts. So if we are this biblical nation, we have to stand by these biblical principles. And the Bible and God gives us the right. He gives us the ammunition. He gives us the knowledge to be able to fight for those things, for those things of justice. So when I say free, say James Richardson. Free?
James Richardson.
Free?
James Richardson.
Free?
James Richardson.
May peace and God be with you all.